This episode of the Amateur Traveler Podcast is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right credit cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover things travel finance, like when lounge access beats buying airport dinner for four, how to survive or even save on a holiday travel, even if you're booking late, appropriate for this episode, and when it makes sense to book flights with cash versus points, which travel reward programs are adding partners and which are subtracting perks. And Smart Travel does that all with a little bit of humor and a lot of travel smarts. I am not the expert on these kind of questions, and one of the places I go to find my answers is NerdWallet. Upgrade trips, not bills, with NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to Smart Travel and NerdWallet for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Here's the thing about being a great gift giver. When you find something truly perfect for everyone on your list, you almost don't want to give it away. That's what happens with me with my Quince order. Everything's so soft and well made, I'm seriously tempted to keep it all for myself. Quince pretty much has your whole list covered. Mongolian cashmere sweaters for $50 when you normally pay $200 or more for them, the kind you'd wear on repeat. Then there's the denim that goes with everything, silk tops and skirts for when you want to look put together, cashmere beanies and scarves and down jackets that actually keep you warm. By working directly with trusted factories that maintain high standards for both craftsmanship and ethical practices, and by cutting out the middlemen and markups, Quince is able to pass those savings straight to you. You've heard me talk about how much I love my Quince travel pants. My wife's pants are now on order too, because she's heard me talk about it a lot, even though she doesn't listen to the show. Find gifts so good you'll want to keep them with Quince. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 975. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about forts and temples and mosques, gardens and museums and tombs as we go to the capital city of India, to Delhi. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Delhi. I'd like to welcome back to the show Jonty Crane from JontyTravels.com, and then also newly from the podcast The Tramping Life. Jonty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I should explain for non-New Zealand listeners that tramping in New Zealand refers to hiking. It's not about living on the streets.
Doesn't relate to being a hobo.
It's not the hobo life.
Okay, that is good to know.
It's about hiking around New Zealand, so the Tramping Life podcast.
And this is the first episode that we've done together that does not include hiking. Am I correct?
I'll try and resist, but I'm pretty sure there'll be no hiking this episode. This is the 6th episode I've recorded with you. But rest assured, I do have some hiking topics for ideas for future episodes.
And the episode we're doing today is on Delhi, India. What's your connection with Delhi?
So I've been there 6 times in the last few years, but generally is a stopover on my way to Ladakh in northern India to go hiking. I've been there.
Well, there's the hiking connection.
Particularly domestic flights in India, I find it best to get into Delhi and spend a night and then make your connection. So on my way there and way back, I spent a couple of days, and I also went to Bhutan, and that again was a similar thing. I'd got my connection through Delhi. So I've probably spent 8 or 9 days there in total, but over 6 different visits, which is quite a good way of doing it, because my take on Delhi is if you can survive the heat, humidity, noise, smell, number of people, traffic, and jet lag, you can pretty much travel anywhere, but it does make Delhi quite good in smaller doses rather than doing a full week. And although on this episode I will talk about probably a week's worth of stuff, I'd probably recommend for most people you're going to spend maybe 2 or 3 days in the city, and this gives you some ideas of the sort of things that you might want to pick and choose from.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked about it on the show before, but the last time, and the only time actually, that I was in Delhi was pre-COVID with a group of amateur travelers. And the air quality was so bad that United Airlines stopped flying while we were in the city because they said it was a risk to their crews.
What
So
time of year was that?
that's a new one on me. I have no idea. I have no idea.
But having said that, Delhi is an amazing place to visit. There's historic forts, mosques, temples, and tombs, very colourful and vibrant markets.
Mhm.
There's some surprisingly pleasant parks, which are a big attraction for me. And it's a really good place to explore the energy of India, but with also some nice places to stay with air conditioning if you need a break from that energy. But it's the capital city. There's a lot going on. It's a vibrant place to visit and explore.
Yeah, I agree. Despite me starting with a negative comment on Delhi, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll put a link, for instance, to some of the historic places that I went in Delhi in the show notes. But what itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
So I've visited most of the sites and a few things which weren't necessarily sites, but I just happened to come across on my exploring around the city. So this will give you a bit of a flavour. If you've got some time in Delhi and you want to have a bit more of a relax, there's some park ideas. If you're really interested in the history, there's lots of historic sites in Delhi. As you say, Chris, you've been before, and I think you've been to a number of the places I'm going to talk about. So we can tag team on this. And you do have a blog post which talks about a number of these sites as well.
Where do we start?
So just a little bit of history to start with. So Delhi is actually one of the oldest cities in the world, but it really picked up in scale and importance from the 12th century. So it was the capital of the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire. And then since 1911, New Delhi has been the capital of India. So that's a planned city part of Delhi. So you've still got Old Delhi, and Delhi itself is huge. And then there's planned city part, which is the New Delhi. So Delhi is one of the largest cities on the planet. It's home to around 33 million people, which given there's 1.3 billion in India is a small fraction, but it's still potentially the second largest city in the world, second only to Tokyo, depending on how you measure these things. And from a geography perspective, I always feel a bit unnerved in flat places, and Delhi is all basically flat. And there's not that many high-rise buildings. So it's quite hard to get a sense of scale of the city. But when you take off from the air, you just see the size of Delhi. It's pretty impressive. I believe Delhi, the city, is about 1,400 kilometers square. So it's a big place. But for most visitors, you're really going to focus on probably 3 or 4 discrete areas, which I'll talk through in this itinerary. So the obvious place people will start in Delhi is Old Delhi. This has the most concentration of historic sites. So if you're looking at a map of Delhi, this is probably towards the northeast of the central part of the city. So starting with Old Delhi, a great place to start. It's quite full on, but it's a really good experience, is to visit the markets and the bazaar. Now, these are just sprawling little side streets. There's endless stalls. There's lots and lots of color. A lot of people will do a rickshaw tour, which is quite intense. It's a really good experience. There's a lot going on anyway, and then you're in a rickshaw and you're going down these narrow little lanes and you're dodging people, and there's people with little scooters, and there's a lot going on. So I've done it on the rickshaw, but I'd suggest repeating it on foot because you just get to soak it in at a slightly more manageable pace. There's all the power cables hanging above your head. There's a lot of retail action going on. There's a lot of color.
You say all the power cables hanging over your head. Anyone who's been there has just gotten a mental image, and other people don't know what you're talking about. Don't all places have power cables hanging above your head? But you're talking about, instead of looking up and seeing a nice ordered set of power cables, it looks like every time someone new got power, they put up another cable.
And then maybe a cable stopped working, so they put another one up. And
they just put up another cable.
To this, there's this massive cables. I want to say it's safe. I don't think it's high. It's clear enough of your heads generally. Depends on how tall you are. But if you haven't experienced that in Bangkok or other places in Southeast Asia, then it can be quite confronting the first time you do it. And just the number of people and the things are going on. And there's just such an eclectic mix of shops. So I came across one street and it was full of bathroom fitting stores. There's 15 bathroom fitting stores in a row. And then a few streets over, they had always stores with beautiful wedding cards. So there's very nice envelopes and cards that they'll gift, and there was maybe 10 stores of those in a row. So it really warrants getting lost and making sure you have Google Maps with the offline map downloaded so you can make your way out at the end. But that's what I did. First time I did it on a rickshaw, and you get a taster for the experience. And then I just wandered around, and when I had enough, I got the map out and then tried to figure my way out of the bazaar. But it's quite an experience.
So is there a particular bazaar you're going to or a particular tour you would recommend?
So these are the markets and the bazaar near the Friday Mosque. So the first time I went to Delhi was through an organised tour. So that was one of the things. So I'm pretty sure you could probably negotiate. I'm assuming, Chris, when you went, you did something similar?
Yeah, we were doing this whole thing as part of a multi-day Intrepid tour.
Yeah,
Intrepid, the company.
and I did it with the Wild Frontier. So depending on how an experienced traveller you are, especially on the first time to Delhi, going with a tour is probably a good idea because there's a lot going on, and just having the support of a tour guide and having things like the rickshaw tour included and what you do with your shoes at the mosque and those kind of things I would recommend. For those who are more intrepid, the activity rather than the tour company, you can do it by yourself very easily. So I've been twice with a tour group, but the rest of the times just independently. And it's fine to get around independently, but you probably on the first time, if you're not that well traveled, it's worth going with a group.
And you talked about doing a rickshaw tour, a tuk-tuk tour of the markets. I found you could hardly help going to some market when you get in a tuk-tuk because somebody's got some market that they want to take you to despite where it is that you want to go. Wouldn't you love to stop at my brother-in-law's shop or something like that? So it's a fairly easy thing to do.
Yeah, agreed. And I think particularly in the more touristic parts of Delhi, there will be lots of people offering tourist services and those kind of things. Once you get out of the half a dozen main tourist sites, you're just left alone. So the last time I was there last month, I was happily wandering around Delhi by myself. Nobody hassled me. Nobody came up to me. I saw one or two other white faces, and that was about it in 3 or 4 days. And so you just left your own devices. But if you are going to the main touristy sites, then yeah, there will be people offering you things. So just to be aware of that.
Sure, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the big attraction there next to the markets and the bazaar is the Friday Mosque, and this was built in the mid-17th century, about the same time as the Red Fort and the Taj Mahal. It's one of the largest mosques in India. Up to 25,000 people can pray in the enclosed courtyard. So when I visited last, it was free to enter, but you had to pay to take a camera in. And obviously, at any mosque, you need to leave your shoes outside, and you probably need to tip the guys to look after your shoes. The one thing I learned from experience is it's best not to go to the mosques in the afternoons because most of these mosques are open air. Like Delhi's a hot climate, it doesn't rain that much, so that it's not a roofed domed building. It's very much a large open courtyard with terracotta or stone floor that gets very hot in the sun. And obviously you're not wearing shoes because you've had to take those off. So I found it quite painful underfoot just going around the mosque. So probably the morning's a better time to visit.
And the other thing I would say is if you're a woman visiting the mosque, you will probably be given a garment to put on over your other garments, depending on what you're wearing. And the ladies in our tour actually enjoyed getting pictures of themselves in these gowns, but it's just something to be aware of. It's a thing.
It's also a great place if you want to get selfies with the locals, because I've found, again, in the sites like the Friday Mosque, the Red Fort, there's international visitors, there's a lot of domestic visitors, and there's a lot of domestic Indian tourists who don't live in Delhi, but they've come to visit. And for them, visitors can be a bit of a novelty. So you may be asked, I remember I got asked for a lot of selfies when I was in Delhi around those tourist sites. I think it was at the India Gate. They effectively formed a queue. I had 6 groups of people queuing up, waiting to get a selfie with me. And I just want to move on. But I was being polite. There was a family group, there was another family, and they were visiting Delhi. And it was part of the attraction was to see visitors. So that's something just to bear in mind. Because I remember taking selfies or getting accosted for selfies in the mosque while my feet were quite hot on the tiles and thinking, okay, I'll get the selfie, but I've got to move on and save at the bottom of my feet.
Huh.
So relatively close to the Friday Mosque is Gurdwara Siskanji Sabija, probably not pronounced entirely correctly, which is a sizable Sikh temple. So in India, you've got Hindu majority, you've got a massive Muslim population, there's a Sikh population as well, and there's Jain and there's Buddhist, there's lots of different religions. And so there's a large Sikh temple in the center of Delhi, which was built on a spot where their 9th guru was beheaded on the orders of the Mughal Empire. Again, you need to remove your shoes and your socks. When you enter, you need to wash your feet and put on a headscarf, and you may need some assistance because I put on the headscarf and I got lots of people laughing at me because that's not the way you put the headscarf on, so they helped me out. There's no photos allowed inside, but it is quite an impressive interior, and next to it is a very well organised food hall. So a big part of the community and religion is around food and eating together, and so they give you free food, and so that's quite an interesting experience to have.
As I recall, we even got to participate in helping make some of that food as part of the tour that we were on. And it is a real big cultural thing as far as the Sikh religion is.
They're very friendly. It's very welcoming. It's a bit confusing when you get there. What do I need to do with my shoes and socks and headscarf and things? But they're quite familiar with visitors, and so that's an interesting place to
Yep.
visit. One of the most photogenic sites, I guess, within Delhi is the Red Fort, which is probably one of the best known. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This has got epic red sandstone walls enclosing a huge area. It's a defensive fort in terms of the wall structure around the perimeter, but there's a lot of different buildings inside. So these date primarily from the Mughal region over a sort of 200-year period. I don't think any of them particularly were standalone amazing, but the number of them and the different things to see, it's a great place you can spend a few hours just to wander around and explore.
We should comment. You mentioned the Mughal Empire multiple times here. So that is a Muslim empire based in northern India that ruled much of northern India in the, I want to say, starting in the 1500s to the 1700s.
Yeah, and then the British came and took it over and worked with them. And yeah, there's a lot of very interesting history about India, and
Yeah.
it's definitely not uniform. There was a lot of different governance mechanisms in place during that period. Now, a site that you probably didn't go to, Chris, which is relatively close to the Red Fort, but I find that Red Fort, Friday Mosque Market's Bazaar, that's the standard, that's where a lot of visitors go.
Yeah.
But just to the south and to the east of that, there's a load of sites all around the back there, which there are very few visitors at. And so last time I visited last month, I thought I'll go back and explore some of those areas. So I started with the Shahidi Park, and this is a 4.5 acre site, and it's Delhi's first outdoor museum. And so it has all these statues that tell India's history basically over thousands of years, with statues of Gandhi and Nehru and people from India's past. And all these statues are made out of discarded materials, primarily metal. So basically, they went and gathered up several tons of scrap metal in Delhi. And then over the course of 6 months, they had 10 artists and 700 skilled artisans. And they turned all this scrap metal into all these different sculptures. Yeah. And they also planted lots of trees and shrubs. And so it's just something a bit different. It didn't cost very much for entry. But that's just a different site. It's not on the tourist itinerary. It's quite interesting to see.
Aura Frames is the answer to every holiday gifting moment. Never struggle again to find the perfect holiday gift. I have my Aura frame in front of me at all times and turned on with pictures of the people I love. I recommended it recently in a short form video, and a friend said she bought one and loves it. What pictures would you put on an Aura frame for a friend or loved one that would make it special for them? Aura Frame includes a gift box. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag, and you can preload photos before it ships. Keep adding them from anywhere, anytime. Don't wait. Win the holidays now with Aura Frames. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Matte Frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code TRAVELER at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code TRAVELER. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now and get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. And thanks to Aura Frames for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
When evaluating potential hires for your small business, it's essential you look beyond resumes. Sure, a candidate may appear impressive on paper, but understanding the person is crucial. LinkedIn, the world's largest professional network, provides a complete view of your candidate's skills, experiences, and interests. With LinkedIn's up-to-date data, you can be confident that you really know who you're hiring. Post your free job at linkedin.com/achieve. That's linkedin.com/achieve. Terms and conditions apply.
And then there's another fort called the Feroz Shah Kolkar Fort. This is probably southeast of the Red Fort. Now, it's not on the scale of the Red Fort, but it's still quite a large fort structure and interesting mosque inside. There's a garden area. And again, it's a good experience if you want to see what the locals are doing. They're out there having picnics, and actually they're still using the mosque, even though it's half abandoned. And it gives you a bit of a flavor for once you get out of those tourist sites in Delhi, you can really have places to yourself. And then heading north from that, so this is to the east of the Red Fort, all along there between the Red Fort and the river, there's a whole bunch of memorial parks. to various important leaders during India's time. So they have a lot of they call them ghats, which is a bit like in Nepal. So these are the tombs or shrines to fallen leaders. Now, the best known, or one of the best known Indian leaders was Mahatma Gandhi. And there's 3 sites there dedicated to Gandhi. So there's a National Gandhi Museum, which has got lots of photos of him. And it's actually got the clothing he was wearing, blood strewn from when he was assassinated and one of the bullets that was used to kill Gandhi. And then next to it, there's 2 park areas, which are quite pleasant places to wander around. And they've got various statues and stuff of Gandhi. And then they've got his tomb, which has got an internal flame going. It's meant to be silence. You take off your shoes. So that's quite a moving place to visit if you're interested in Gandhi. And then heading through that area, you realize that the life expectancy of an Indian prime minister is quite short, because you have Nehru, who died from a heart attack whilst in office, and I think his successor also died in office. And then you've got Indira Gandhi, who was assassinated by her bodyguards, and then you've got her son, who was also prime minister, who also got assassinated. And so there's a bit of a litany of these leaders, and they've done different memorials to them. So again, there was nobody around when I visited. It was very quiet. It was very hot, but they're beautifully maintained gardens and just quite a peaceful place to wander around. And then heading basically northward, and then you go around the side of the Red Fort walls, and there's a very impressive bridge, the Salamgarh Bridge, which is built of the same red brick as the Red Fort, and it basically crosses the road over to where there's another old fort, which was the other side of the road. So it's easy to go to Delhi and go, here's half a dozen things to see, but actually just walking around the place, it's like a living museum. There's so many historic sites, and I, on my travels, came across a whole bunch of sites which weren't even in the guidebooks or I come across online. I was just like, oh, there's an old waterfall, there's an old mosque or something. They're really blessed with a lot of heritage in Delhi, more than you might expect. So that's a bit of a flavour for Old Delhi. Now, heading south to New Delhi. So this is the planned part of the city which the British designed. And the most prominent landmark there is probably India Gate. This is a 42-metre high memorial arch dedicated to Indian soldiers who lost their lives. This is very popular with domestic visitors and international visitors. It's a big arch in a long, wide open space. There's not a huge amount to see there, but it's a good spot to stop at. And relatively close to there, there's the National Museum. Now, the National Museum, India's got a long history. It's got a lot of interesting things that have happened. There's a lot of interesting artifacts. It's a huge museum. I think there's 22 galleries with 64 sections, and you get a bit overloaded with Hindu and Buddhist statues by the end of it, but it is a very interesting place to visit. So, yeah, National Museum for museum lovers. Yeah, you just need to allow a few hours to visit it. Relatively close to that is the National Gallery of Modern Art, which I didn't visit, but that's there for art lovers. Also in that area, there's the New Delhi train station, and obviously trains have got an important role in Indian culture, and so just visiting the train station is an experience in itself. Now, with security, you may not be allowed just to wander in, but there's certainly a lot of stuff going on. There's porters. If you do, I called a train the first time I went, I called a train from there heading north, and there's people sleeping on the platforms. There's just a lot going on. And so, yeah, if you can have a look at the train station, if that's of interest, that might be something for you. Now, also around this area, there's some beautiful tombs and gardens, which are some of probably the loveliest places in Delhi. There's the Safdarjung tomb, which was the last significant Mughal building built in Delhi, and that was in the mid-18th century. And then the Lodi Gardens are absolutely stunning. So these are home to a whole bunch of Mughal tombs from the 15th and 16th centuries, and they're just a very quiet park atmosphere, green and grassy. There's probably some locals playing cricket, lots of young lovers wandering around. And they're not the Taj Mahal, but they are still quite impressive and photogenic tombs. And they're just a lovely place to wander around. Then heading towards southeast Delhi, you've got Humayun's tomb, which is another UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this was a precursor to the Taj Mahal. So this is where it all started really in terms of tomb design. So this was built in the mid-16th century. Before that, tombs were relatively small, but this one is significantly larger, and it's home to the tombs of 160 people. So rather than just for one individual, it's the whole family, and it's a very impressive square, multi-tiered, layered tomb structure that's really good just to wander around and explore. And then next to it, there's 3 earlier tombs. So there's Khan's tomb, which is quite colourful and eclectic. There's the barber's tomb, which is quite a simple tomb. And then there's Fasawala's tomb. And there's not much left of that one because it's the problem. If you die before other leaders, your subsequent leaders tend to plunder your tombs to build their tombs. That's what happened in Egypt. They're like, well, we need a bit of building material. I didn't really like my uncle, so I'll take half of his tomb and use it to build my tomb. So there's not much left of that one. There's also Nizamuddin Dargah, which is a Sufi shrine and mosque from the 14th century. And all these buildings, they're maybe not quite as red as the Red Fort, but they're sandstone and they're not beautifully preserved, but they're very atmospheric. You can see that they are old and you can appreciate the history of them. And although the India Archaeological Survey does do a great job given the amount of historic sites in India, they're not pristine, manicured, controlled sites. So you can clamber over things and you can explore everywhere. And so for those who like to really explore without being stuck behind fences, this is a great place to do. There's another big fort, which is the Purana Quilla, which is a huge 16th century fort. And that has some very impressive gates and a beautiful mosque. Now, I didn't visit, but there is the Baha'i Lotus Temple. There's a number of Baha'i temples around the world. I think we talked about it on a previous episode because there's one in Samoa. There's a beautiful one near Chicago. And there's one in Delhi, which opened in 1986. And it has a very iconic lotus design. It's a 9-sided temple with this beautiful giant lotus design, which has got very well-maintained gardens around it. And also in this area, there's a bunch of museums. So these are definitely not must-visit museums, but if you're interested in a specific topic, you may want to visit. So the Indian Air Force Museum is not that well maintained, but if you're interested in seeing old planes and helicopters and things, that might be of interest. The National Rail Museum, again, everything there looks like it's seen better days. But if you're into trains, particularly, they've got quite a lot of engines and rolling stock from the hill railways. So things like the Shimla Railway or the Darjeeling Railway, there's some of those there. There's also a National Museum of Natural History and a National Stamp Museum is also there. They're not world class, but if you've got a bit of time and you've got an interest in those topics, they may be worth a visit.
Okay.
Then heading a bit further south, you've got the Qutb Minar, which is a 73 high meter minaret. And this, again, is another UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's part of a complex. And this is probably one of the oldest historic sites in Delhi. So this was completed in 1220 by one of the first Muslim rulers of Delhi. And so it is a really ornate minaret. It's really quite impressive to see. And there's a few other sites in the complex. There's this 7-meter high iron pillar, which apparently is over 1,600 years old. And they don't understand how it hasn't rusted. And so it's so pure, but they don't understand how they built it using the technology of the time. So that's a bit of a mystery. So that's a specific site. And close to that, there's an archaeological park with, again, some more tombs and some ruins and an old mosque. And again, quite atmospheric places to wander around. Azim Khan tomb is one of the few places on a hill. I'd read that it may be a bit dodgy there. You could see it from across the road. So I saw it from a distance because it was on the hill, so I could see it. But I didn't actually go inside. But close to that, there is a well-maintained Jain temple on an equally high hill, which is topped with a Buddha statue. And then there's also, coming towards the end, there's the Khas District Park, which when I was in Delhi last month, I was looking around Google Maps and there was a big blob of green. I thought, I wonder what there is there. And I had quite an enjoyable hour or so wandering around this large park. So there's a deer park, there's lots of monkeys around, there's a very vibrantly green lake, which was once a royal water tank. And then there's a number of sites around it, including some tombs as part of a fort. And there was lots of locals just enjoying a Sunday afternoon around town. And then the last site I'll highlight is the Asharam Temple. This is in eastern Delhi, and this is massive. This is like probably one of the biggest Hindu temples in the world. It's following a specific guru, and I think the same guru's got one in America, which is slightly larger. But it's a huge Hindu temple complex opened in 2005. You can't take photos inside, which I found quite hard. There's very strict rules around nothing electronic is allowed in. So no phones and no cameras, and then you have to leave your bag checked. So you check everything there and you walk around, and it's very ornately designed. There's water shows, there's carvings. It's interesting because when you visit all these archaeological sites, they probably look like this when they were built new. But I like the old stuff. I like the weathered look and feel. And so to see something that was pristine, is a different experience. But it's free entry. It's quite an interesting experience to visit. So that gives you a bit of an idea of some of the sites. So as I said, it's quite heavy on the forts and the tombs and the parks. And in terms of getting around, I've described 4 or 5 different areas there. Now, most of those areas are walkable once you're there, bearing in mind that climate in Delhi can be quite full on. So spring, which is February to March, the temperatures are quite pleasant. Summer, April, May, it can get up to 45 degrees. Do not visit Delhi in the summer. It's super, super hot.
Okay.
And then that's followed by the monsoon. So June to September, it is a bit cooler, but it is more humid. And then the autumn is October to November, and that's a bit more pleasant temperatures. I think when I visited, it was probably September, October, both times. And it was certainly hot and humid. It was often cloudy, which kept the heat from the sun off, but it's still, you're out for a few hours. It'd be hard to spend a whole day out on your feet walking around the place. Like after 2 or 3 hours, I'm like, okay, I need to go to some air conditioning and have a bit of a cool down. In winter, so December to January, that's got the coolest temperatures, but that's when the air pollution is probably at its worst. So that may be when you visited Paris. Yeah, because it is a good time to visit India during the Northern Hemisphere winter, but the trouble is, the air pollution can be pretty bad. Now, in terms of getting around those places, so those 4 or 5 places described, what I tend to do is stay in one place and I just travel around the city. Ubers are very cheap and they're easy to do, but the traffic in Delhi is regarded as some of the worst traffic in the world. And so I found for short trips, it's fine. If you're trying to last time I went, I stayed near the airport and then went into the old town. I think it may have taken like an hour and a half in traffic. And although you're just a passenger in an Uber, it's quite a stressful experience. To be a driver is even more stressful in India, but even just to be a passenger, I find can be quite stressful because the traffic is constantly stop, start. Everybody's trying to get in every spot. It's always interesting because
lanes are not a concept that is well established in India, at least in Delhi. Yeah.
And I also find if a car ever stops because there's a red light or if there's roadworks or, as I found up in northern India, the road has been washed away and you can't get any further. So you're in this vehicle and you stop and go, okay, we can't get any further. The cars behind seem to think, why is that car stopped in the road? It can't be for any good reason. I'm going to overtake it and I'm just going to wedge in front. And then there's 2 or 3 cars stopped, wedged in ahead. I'll just try and get around them. And so they go around the side and try and wedge in. And then the motorbikes come along and go, I've got a motorbike. So they weave between the vehicles and you just end up with this massive jam of vehicles. It is an experience. I'd almost recommend doing it at least once just for having the experience. But it isn't that restful. So actually one time I went, which is, I think, the way I should do it in subsequent trips to Delhi, is if you want to travel longer distances across the city, use the metro system. The metro system is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
The longest
Absolutely.
in the world. There's 285 stations. There's separate carriages for women. It's very efficient. It's air conditioned. It's very cheap. And so what I should do in future is get the metro close enough to where I want to get to, or the closest station, and then get an Uber for the last 10, 15 minutes. That's probably the best way to get around the city. But taking Uber, even though it is very cheap, it just takes time and it's a bit stressful trying to get across the whole city. There are lots of buses around. You can get taxis, there's tuk-tuks. There's no shortage of ways of getting around Delhi. It's just a trade around your comfort levels and air conditioning and various other things. But pretty much all of them are cheap. Like the Ubers are very cheap, the tuk-tuks are very cheap, the metro system is very cheap. So it doesn't cost you money. It might just cost you time.
Yeah, you talk about traffic, and I've shared it on the show before, but I remember lying in bed in a hotel in New Delhi and listening for what was the longest period of time I could go without hearing a car horn honk, and it was 6 seconds. And I think it was 2 a.m.
The city never sleeps. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Again, it's an experience. Delhi is a fantastic travel experience. I wouldn't say unique because there are similar places, but it's probably one of the more accessible places to visit to get this quite full-on experience.
Mm-hmm.
But you do need to manage the heat and a good accommodation, somewhere you can retreat to that you can have air conditioning and you can cool down and relax is a good idea. So there are lots of accommodation options around town. Some of the nicer places tend to be in New Delhi. Now, around the New Delhi area, actually, I forgot to mention, there's a whole embassy quarter. And it's quite interesting to see all the different designs of the buildings. And it's completely different to old Delhi. The roads are wide, there's roundabouts everywhere, there's lots of greenery.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
I got a message that our flight was canceled. But they can put us on another flight, and we just need to confirm our credit card info.
Wait, I got a security alert from McAfee. It flagged that message as a scam.
McAfee's scam detector automatically spots and alerts you to suspicious texts, emails, and deepfake videos. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
But where I've tended to stay recently, because I've been transiting through Delhi, is near the airport. So there's a place called Aero City, which is a probably 3 or 4 by 3 or 4 city blocks in terms of size. And there's a bunch of Western chain hotels there of varying price points. I think the Ibis is probably the cheapest, and it was fine to stay at. Now, if you look on something like Booking.com, there's this whole area also called Aero City, and it's basically a motorway. And you've got the Aero City with all the Western style hotels on one side of the motorway, and then you've got all the local hotels on the other side of the motorway. Now, I did stay there once, and I would not recommend it because the information online is almost all inaccurate. Like, it's fake news. It is fake. You look at a hotel and you go, oh, it's $10 a night and the photos look really nice. And then you go, but hang on, these two hotels, the photos are identical. How does that work? Because they're not photos of the actual hotel. So I wouldn't trust what's on Booking.com or a lot of those online websites for booking for local Indian hotels. Google Maps is a better option for really seeing what the hotel looks like. So I'd always have a look on Google Maps. And then there was one I looked at on Google Maps, and it had lots of really good 5-star reviews. I thought, okay, this looks reasonable. And then I read one of the 1-star reviews, and it said when they were checking into the hotel, the owners asked for the people's phone as part of the check-in process. And they were like, okay, we'll hand over our phone. And then when they looked over the counter, the person in the hotel was on Google Maps, on their phone, adding a 5-star review of the establishment. So you just have to be really quite careful, I think, those hotels on that Aero City side. So again, I tried it once. I think I paid $10 and I got what I paid for. What you see online is not what you're going to get in reality. It was fine. It was pretty basic. But I think staying in the Western Star hotels is probably more suited to most visitors who are listening to this podcast.
And similar to what you were saying before about the metro, which is so good, staying someplace near a metro stop is also a really nice thing, where if you can avoid the tuk-tuk and the Uber for a metro ride, you're going to appreciate that.
Exactly. And the Aero City, there is a metro from there. Because what they've introduced, interesting, Uber, I don't know if they do this in other countries, I've only seen it in India, is when the Uber arrives, you have a code on your Uber app that the Uber driver has to enter into their Uber app in order for the ride to work effectively.
Oh, I've seen that in some places, yeah.
Yeah, because what I found in previous trips to Delhi was I'd go out to get my Uber and a car would come up and say, I'm your Uber. And I'm like, the number plate's different. They're like, no, get in. And I'm like, no. So yeah, they've obviously added that from a security perspective.
Interesting. Yeah, I can't think of where I ran into that. I think it was in the UAE last year, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that works well. And if you're trying to get a SIM card, so I think previously, Chris, you've had issues with eSIMs or... No?
I tend to use eSIMs exclusively these days. So the phone, I haven't put a SIM card in it ever, possibly, in the 2 years that I've owned this phone.
So I think you interviewed somebody on a previous Amateur Traveller episode and they were talking about the eSIM not working in Delhi. I think that issue is being sorted out. I know there has been a bit of backwards and forwards with the Indian government. They're
interesting.
Yeah, they're quite sensitive around some of these areas. But it was certainly my experience as of, August 2025, eSIM worked fine in Delhi. Now, if you're visiting NAC or any of the border regions of India, like Kashmir as well, then eSIMs don't work.
And For those who don't know what we're talking about, if you have to take out your paper clip and push it into your phone and get the chip to come out and replace that chip, then you're talking about a SIM. And an eSIM is all done electronically inside the phone. And so you just add in a code that enables yet another service that you're basically paying something for a certain number of megabytes or for certain phone calls or not, depending on which eSIM you get, but you aren't doing anything physically with the phone where you're adding in any electronics.
And they're excellent because you can buy them before you arrive, and then when you generally have to be on Wi-Fi or something to activate them. So you get to the airport, you activate it, and then you can get your Uber from the airport. Yeah, they're very convenient.
Yep. Agreed.
So in other parts of logistics, so in terms of flights, Delhi is a very well connected hub. It's quite a decent airport as well. The terminals are fine. It has got some very strict airport security, depending on what's been happening recently with Pakistan or in the area. I think actually when I visited last time, it wasn't quite as bad as the previous visit, but it's a standard airport. There might just be a bit more security. So they tend to do checks before you can even be allowed into the terminal. You need to show your passport, flight details just to get into the terminal. And they may do an X-ray on your large bags there. And then obviously you check things in, and they may also do some checks before you board your flight. So just factor that in. You may want to allow a bit more time at the airport than usual.
Yeah, I'd say that's the only thing you need to know is just a lot more time. Yep.
From a safety perspective, as a guy, I'm very fortunate from that position. I felt safe wandering around Delhi by myself. I'm not going out in the evenings in the dark, but certainly during the daytime, it felt fine. Women do need to be more careful, unfortunately. Women, particularly women by themselves or just a couple of women, they can get hassled in India by men. There have been situations around that. So that's something to be aware of, particularly if you're a solo female traveler or traveling two women together. There probably will be a level of minor harassment depending on where you are and what's going on. So just to be aware of that. Scams can be popular at some of the more popular tourist sites. Particularly expect to be approached by children begging, potentially with their parents, which can be quite confronting. In general, it's best not to give any money because that's just encouraging more begging. So again, that's really around the touristy things. But if that's the first time experience, it is quite a confronting experience to see that level of poverty just out on the streets. Yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. And say, do check if you're looking at reviews for things like on Google Maps or other places. It does pay to do a bit of due diligence because they're finding lots of innovative ways of making sure that they get 5-star rankings. So again, on the hotels I was looking at Booking.com, I'm like, or even on Google Maps, this has got 20 5-star reviews and they all were posted within the same week by different users, but then you're like, that seems a bit suspicious. So yeah, it's worth sense checking what you see online. In terms of security, it's not just the airport, particularly any hotels and quite a lot of the tourist sites, you expect to get your bags x-rayed. I've been going into sort of any Western chain hotel, they will get the mirrors out and look underneath the vehicles for any bombs. They'll open up the bonnet and they'll open up the boot. And that's even the car that owned by the hotel that came and pick me up from the airport, that went through as well. And then I had to put my bags through to get into the lobby of the hotel. So it's fine. It doesn't really take that much more time. It's just something to be aware of. Now, there is quite a lot of wildlife in Delhi, probably more so than most cities of that size and scale. There are dogs around. They tend to leave you alone during the daytime, but at night, Indian dogs rule the streets. So you can hear them wandering around and in packs and barking. Yeah, I don't like dogs anyway, so doing that at night, yeah, you just want to be careful. Monkeys are quite a common sight, particularly in some of the park areas. Again, I'm not a big fan of monkeys. I wouldn't get too close to them, but there's definitely, you will see monkeys around. Cows are sacred in Hinduism, and so you will see just cows wandering around the main roads in Delhi, and also horses I saw just wandering around the streets. So again, adds a bit of character to the city. You're not going to see that in New York. So it's an Indian special.
When I would have to say in Delhi versus, say, Varanasi, which is a holy city and is really more the deep end of India travel, I didn't see as many cows wandering in the streets in Delhi. For one thing, the traffic is just not going to allow it.
In terms of facilities, there was a noticeable difference between when I visited in 2019 and when I visited in 2025. There's a lot more public toilets now. And I reckon there's more public toilets in Delhi than there are in London or New York. There was way more than I expected.
Interesting.
Because I was getting a bit, it's hot, I want to drink water, but I don't want, if there's no toilet facilities. But around Era City, there were just some public toilets around a lot of the park areas and the tourist sites. The Indian government has spent a lot of money on building public toilets. So that's great.
Interesting.
In terms of language, actually less English is spoken than you might think. If you're at the main tourist sites, people speak English, it's fine. But as soon as you start getting away from that, actually the level of English is relatively low. I'm not suggesting that you need to learn Hindi, but you may not be having a long conversation with your taxi driver. Like, you might say hello and how are you, and that's about it. Otherwise, yeah, it's fine for getting around, but it might be slightly different to what you expect.
Interesting. Okay.
In terms of costs, you can pretty much spend as little or as much as you want. So you can do things very cheaply in India, and you can also stay in some very nice 5-star places. Most attractions have international and local pricing. And so the international rate is generally 10 times that of what the locals pay.
Or more. I was just looking and seeing that when I was there for the Iron Pillar, for instance, in that site, it was 10 rupees to 250 rupees. Not that 250 rupees is still all that much, but yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. Which I think is fair enough. And as you say, the prices, I think the most expensive...
Oh, yeah. I think that's $2.8 or something.
It's insane cheap, yeah. Most tourist sites were somewhere between 50 rupees and 500 rupees. And say 500 rupees is, I know, $5. To visit the Red Fort or to visit these amazing sites, like, it is not an issue. And actually what they do in the busier places, I remember, I think it was the Red Fort, they had separate queues. And the queue for the local rate was several hundred people long. I felt a bit guilty about it. There was no queue for the international. I just walked up, paid my 500 rupees and went straight in.
And I remember at some of those sites having the locals usher me along with, no, you don't need to be here. You want to be over in that other queue. And it didn't seem to bother them because they knew they were paying a lot less. And they just wanted to make sure you were standing in the right place. So it was very helpful that way.
Now, what I found in the sort of 6 years between my trips was mobile and card payments are becoming a lot more common. So a lot of places you can do that. It's still worth having some cash, and actually cash is interesting because a lot of Indians now, they don't actually tend to use much cash themselves because they've got mobile payment apps on their phones. But those tend to be India-specific banking apps. So I think I found it harder this time trying to get change because the locals aren't using change. They're just swiping their phone and paying for the site using their phone. So that's a certain way. If you do get change, you need to hoard your change. I found in terms of getting money out from ATMs, it can be a bit hit and miss. I think when I was in Aero City, I must have taken me 4 attempts to find an ATM that worked with my credit card. There is a limit generally on the ATMs of 10,000 rupees per transaction, but you can make multiple transactions. So I think I got 30,000 rupees out. So I just put the card through 3 times. I paid international ATM charges 3 times, but 10,000 rupees is what, $100, and that would get you quite a long way in Delhi. Then the only final bit of logistics to touch on is if you have a drone, do not bring it to India. They will confiscate it and you will not have it. Like, you are not allowed to take a drone to India. That is a very strict rule.
Interesting. It's not a matter of using it. It's just even having it.
Yes. It's interesting being in India, the security situation and some of the restrictions on some of the internet they've had in the past. They can be quite strict with their rules.
Sure. Excellent. Seems like we are wrapping up here. Anything else we want to make sure that people know before we get to our wrap-up questions?
I think that's good. I always take some water with you, sun protection.
And filtered water. We're not drinking water out of the fountains. This is India.
Although interesting, not water from the fountains, but a lot of places now, rather than buying bottled water, you can get filtered water, and they basically use like a UV treatment to make sure the water's fine. Yeah. And I've seen often in hotels and places and restaurants, they might default to going, okay, there's Western guests, we're going to bring out the bottled water. That's a lot of plastic waste. If you say, no, can I have the filtered water? That is fine. That's perfectly fine to drink. They put a UV filter through it, which is what you do for the mobile water treatment. And so that's perfectly fine. And it saves on getting a huge amount of plastic. So I would recommend doing that where possible, but you're probably not going to drink the water directly from the tap.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Delhi.
Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I think I'm going with one of the gardens with some of the tombs. So somewhere like Lodi Gardens or Manian's tomb, particularly around sunset, where it's not quite as hot and there's nice colour in the sky. There's probably some locals playing cricket. There's young Indians wandering around. It's not your typical image of what you expect Delhi to be like.
Okay. I would have to say, for some reason, for me, of all the different historic sites you talked about, the minaret, the Qutub Minar, just was that particular spot, that particular complex was the most attractive for me. But I would agree the Lodi Gardens also would have been a good answer. So, yeah. Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Delhi.
I've talked about the selfies already, but another thing I've
Wait,
seen
you
is...
talked about selfies? Oh, yes.
In
Sorry.
the beginning,
Got it.
yes, people love the selfies. But another thing I've noticed is if you faint in India, which might be through heat stroke, somebody in our group the first time they got heat stroke because it was pretty hot. The Indian solution to somebody passing out seems to be to hit the person on the head repeatedly.
Oh.
I think it's something about trying to get the blood flowing, but I've seen this multiple times happen now. And even on a flight where I saw this Indian lady pass out and her colleague was busy pitching her on the head until she came to. And I thought, if I'd passed out, that's the last thing that I would like happening to me. So that's not something I've seen elsewhere.
I think for me, there was you talked about the Red Fort. I have not been to the Red Fort because we got into a tuk-tuk and said the Red Fort, and his story was the Red Fort was closed today. And I don't think that was really true. And I think we ended up going to see his brother-in-law's shop instead or something like that. So I think at that point, it would have been good to just get out of that tuk-tuk and get in another one.
Correct, yeah. I tend to walk around. The pavements are actually pretty decent in Delhi. Like, it's a reasonable city for walking, apart from the heat and the humidity and the pollution. If you can find a way to manage those things, it's actually quite a nice place to walk around for short distances, and then obviously use transport to get longer ways.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Delhi in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Exhilarating, exhausting, and enthralling.
Excellent. Excellent. Our guest again has been Jonty Crane from JontyTravels.com. And Jonty, do you have a particular article we should send people over to for Delhi?
I've got a couple of blog posts. I've got one about New Delhi and one about Old Delhi. So if you just go onto the website and search for Delhi, then those will come up.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming back on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Delhi.
My pleasure.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
A special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my job now, and I appreciate them. If you're interested in learning more about what you get or how to become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/Amateur Traveler. There are still spots available for the Turkmenistan-Uzbekistan trip in May of 2026. Either drop me an email or go to amateurtraveler.com/trips. And again, we're 25 episodes away from the 1,000th episode. And as part of that countdown to 1,000, I would love to hear what you think about Amateur Traveler, especially if you've been listening for a while. Go to amateurtraveler.com/1000 to tell me more about what you think. I heard from Jeffrey on the episode I did on Kansas. I really enjoy your podcast, and I think they're very informative, and I just want to say thank you very much. Keep up the great travels and a great job that you are doing. I really enjoyed your last podcast you did on the state of Kansas. I thought it was very interesting. There's a lot more to do in that state than a lot of people think, but I really enjoy learning new things too. Thanks very much, Chris. You're the best. And thanks, Jeffrey. You're the best. I also heard recently from someone, but I've lost track of who I heard from. But it said, I want to give your podcast a shout out. I was listening to another travel podcast with a well-known name. As destinations were discussed, the hosts repeatedly noted they had not been to the places they were discussing. I really appreciate that either you or your guests have been to the places on each week's itinerary and bring an authentic perspective of the destination. It makes a difference. Thank you for all you do and keep us learning and traveling. P.S. I hope it is also clear I'm not talking about Rick Steves, as he and his team also bring a first-hand point of view. And I did not think you were talking about Rick Steves, but honestly, I'm curious who you were talking about because I don't know. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
My name is Percy Jackson. Getting in trouble is like breathing for me.
The hit series returns to Disney Plus and Hulu.
The danger is greater than you can possibly imagine.
What about Grover? Save Grover. Save camp.
Percy Jackson and the Olympians. New season now on Disney Plus and Hulu. Learn more at disneyplus.com/what's-on.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Like, Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.